Le Nissan Kick-Split 2025 a beaucoup de plus. Apple CarPlay intégré pour jouer vos tunes préférées, des fonctions avancées de sécurité, un rendement énergétique remarquable, puis même la petite odeur de char neuf qu'on aime tant. Tout ça en plus pour moins. Le Nissan Kick-Split 2025 est le véhicule neuf le plus abordable au Québec. Achetez-le à partir de seulement 22 774 $, incluant un rabais à l'achat comptant de 2 600 $. Profitez de cette offre avantageuse chez votre concessionnaire dès maintenant. Jusqu'au 2 mars, des conditions s'appliquent. Détails chez Nissan.
Well, by now, of course, you've heard the news of the CBC, Canada's public broadcaster, saying they're going to pause their use of Twitter. That followed Twitter, Elon Musk's Twitter, placing a label on the broadcaster's Twitter profile, labeling them as government-funded media. CBC says that label misleads Canadians. They argue that they fund 30% of themselves on their own, and that it's only 70% of the public corporation that is government-funded. In response, Twitter adjusted the label to 70% government-funded media, and then when a Twitter user joked to Elon Musk that it's actually slightly less than 70%, the website settled on the label of 69% government-funded media. In light of all this, we have seen both the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, and the leader of the official opposition, Pierre Poilievre, going at it, sort of playing a battle of who's dividing Canadians more. Well, Tasha Kheiriddin has her take on this, and she points her finger in another direction. She points her finger at the CBC when it comes to dividing Canadians. Tasha is at Center Ice Canadians and a columnist extraordinaire, and she's on the line. Hi, Tasha.
Hey, Elias. How are you?
So I'm doing well. So I want to point this out. Your latest column in the National Post. Here's the headline, and I know you don't do headlines, right? Usually you got.
I don't write them. I just write the copy. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the headline, which is "Woke CBC Dividing Canadians on the Public Dime." You don't do the headlines. I understand why you'd use "Woke CBC." Gets clicks if I'm the National Post, right? But I want to get to the real point of dividing Canadians. Why do you take aim at Canada's public broadcaster?
So what I did was looked at, why are the Conservatives complaining about the CBC? They say that it follows the government line, but that's not actually true. Because if it followed the government line, if there was like a hotline from PMO to CBC, which there isn't, during the Harper years, it would have been conservative in its outlook. It would have slanted its coverage to conservative issues or conservative subjects, and it didn't do that. So what it does do, though, is it has a general, what we call small L liberal line, a certain view of Canada, and it's based in two things. It's based in the Broadcasting Act, which defines CBC, its mission as exploring Canadian diversity, showcasing the kinds of stories that private broadcasters would not seek out because they don't pay the rent. And then it also attracts people over time culturally who support this line of thinking, who want to work for a public broadcaster because they don't like commercial television or they want to have funding from the government. So over time, it attracts people and builds a culture that is very supportive of a bigger government. That is just how it works. So what you end up with is it reflects a big government view of what Canada is or should be, which is not the view of many Canadians, including the Conservatives. So it ends up, instead of uniting people, it divides them because it only shows part of what Canada is. And it is a very progressive view, very urban, very Toronto-centric view. That's where, the mothership of CBC is. And we're talking English CBC here, not French CBC. But that is what happens. So as a result, it actually now has become an instrument of division as opposed to unifying. If it was private, no one would care what it put on the air. You'd watch it or not. Because it uses your money, it becomes this divisive faction.
You mentioned, small L, right? That small L liberalism from before. Do you think it's still a small L liberal, or is it something else on the left right now?
Well, my editor used the word woke, and I use it in the piece as well. I think because, yes, it does represent a very progressive view or tell very progressive stories, and if you go on the website and you look, for example, at CBC Gem and what they offer in terms of stories about the environment or documentaries, you will find, you have to really look. I found one where there was discussion of things like carbon capture and alternative ways of, producing energy, but still fossil fuels. The rest of it is all like, hagiography of Greta Thunberg and pieces on, from featuring David Suzuki. It goes on and on and on. And so you get a very one-sided view of what it is. You're not telling actually a lot of the stories that are happening in Canada to fight climate change in the oil patch, for example. That story's not being told. So part of Canada's being left out, and part of the vision of how you deal with social issues is left out. And that's the problem, is that, it's a small L or leftist or woke or progressive, whatever you want to call it, vision. It has been skewed too far to one side. And as a result, it's not telling the stories of a lot of people in the country, and it's not reflecting their view. And like I said, if it was a private broadcaster, no one would care because you'd either watch it or not. Fox News is incredibly biased in the U.S. CNN has a bias. They all have biases, let's be honest. Mm-hmm. But you can choose. Here you have no choice because you're paying for it through your taxes.
With Tasha Kheiriddin, and Tasha, you're on the advisory council of Centre Ice Canadians. Centre being the defining word in that. You're not an extremist here. You mentioned the people that are being left out. So when you leave out people and don't tell their stories, don't focus on them. Tell me about what your worries are on how that divides the country.
Well, what it does is it makes people angry, and it makes them turn to champions for their cause. And you're seeing the Conservative Party go very far right, and not right in terms of, economic issues. It was always more on the right there. But in terms of its attitudes towards institutions, its attitudes, anti-elite conversation, we want to tear down everything. And so tearing down the CBC is very much in their lens. Pierre Poilievre has been saying this throughout the leadership campaign. It got him huge applause line. It was whenever he spoke. And it's around that, let's burn everything down mantra that a lot of people now find themselves in the Conservative Party. They want to just tear stuff down, which is not actually a conservative view. Conservatives believe in incremental change. They believe not in revolution, but in, practical, in fact, more, I'd say, centrist in some ways, progressive conservative. That doesn't mean progressive to the left, which is just about as much as tearing stuff down, right? And let's tear all the rich down. But you're getting it now from both ends. So, yeah, it's a problem because it feeds into that sense of extremism. You got to have extreme radical change. Do I believe that the CBC should change? 100%. Would I like to see it go to a private model? Yeah. Would I do it tomorrow? No. I would do it over time because otherwise, you're going to throw 7,500 people out of work. And you're also, a lot of people in the country still like certain aspects of CBC. We need to have a conversation, like what do people keep, what do people not? So this is where I think the conversation should go. Instead of the extremes of let's burn it down, it's all terrible, and then Justin Trudeau on the other side running to its defense.
So Tasha, one thing that gets me about, and I know so many people that work at the CBC. We're all, like in real life, most people are genuinely good people, right? So you have good people, they're working at the CBC, they're trying to accomplish good work, like we do here at CJD and every other media outlet, right? But here's the thing that has been getting me about CBC and their coverage in the last little while. I too often find the exact same mentality and thinking about covering Canada that I find from state broadcasters around the world. So I can find the same type of thought on Canada on RT, which is Russian propaganda, on Al Jazeera, which is propaganda that comes out of the Middle East, and they'll have the same take as a story I'll see on the CBC. And I'm like, times you want the public broadcaster to be proud of the country, and if you're not, if it's always like a down view on why Canada is terrible, I think it can only lead to division, right? That's a bit of my problem. And I wonder how you fix that side of things editorially without a government getting involved, because that's another thing you don't want. You don't want the government telling CBC what to do, but you sort of want editorially maybe a little bit more, I don't know, something that speaks to more people.
Well, what you don't want is a state line. Absolutely. I mean, I haven't analyzed CBC to the point of comparing it. I'm glad you have. That's really interesting. But when you think of state propaganda, you think of it's dictated by. Not that there can be journalists who honestly believe and reflect that line. But to your point, if there's a sense of alignment with government interests, that's too much of a sense of supporting not government of a particular stripe, but government as writ large, then you have this built-in big government bias, which is what I said CBC has developed over time. It is a cultural fact, and most journalists in most media are more to the left. Why? Because media traditionally, journalism has been to question institutions, question established order. Investigative journalism does that exact thing. It will investigate the powers that be, hold them to account. So you take that to a certain end and you end up with, okay, well, who are we holding to account? That becomes the question. If you're only holding conservatives to account, for example, for their failures, as opposed to liberals, then people say, well, you're biased, right? Mm-hmm. You have a built-in bias, and it's, to your point, it's like other countries where, oh my gosh, we're not going to question what the government does. We support their line. So you have to be really careful, and this is why having a state-funded broadcaster in 2023 is a big question. Why do we have one? It used to be that there was no broadcasting. Broadcasting was in its infancy. There was no infrastructure. When the CBC started, there was nothing else. So we saw it as a way to disseminate information and tell stories to each other because we didn't have any other channels. But now, with the multiverse and the multi-universe of channels and YouTube, social media platforms, all the different ways people communicate, they choose. And they're also significantly not choosing the CBC. Their share is going down and down and down in terms of viewership. So again, we're spending $1 billion a year. What are we getting? It's not just about the news. It's about all sorts of the programming they do and documentaries and TV series, because people still watch TV, but I'm not one of them, but they stream it now, but it's called still TV. Like, we're spending all this money on CanCon, I guess, but why is that? If people aren't watching it, why are we doing it is the question too.
Tasha, we're going to leave it there.
Okay.
I invite everyone to head over to the National Post if they want to read your latest column on this one. And then, of course, to check out your website where you can find your Substack and even read more words from you. Tasha, thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Elias. Have a great day.
That's Tasha Kheiriddin from Center Ice Canadians.